One thing that is unique about the comic book fandom is our care for detail and continuity. We love to flex our comic book knowledge to others and our understanding of very convoluted topics. We care so much about our favorite characters that whenever a writer interprets them in a way that contradicts our view, we bash them. Even though the fandom can be way too harsh sometimes, this aspect of comic book fans generally has a good effect. Because we care about the world and the characters, each writer that takes on a certain character has to write him or her accurately. But what about translating those stories, characters, and worlds to other mediums, such as film, animation, or games? Well, that's what I'm here to talk about today. My name is Joshua C, and today, in the first video of a few that we'll be tackling about comic book adaptations, we'll answer the question, does accuracy in comic book adaptations matter? The answer to this question, in my opinion, isn't as straightforward as a yes or a no. Not because I want to appeal to everybody, but because this topic is more complicated than it may seem. The general answer to this question, though, is no, and I agree to this on many levels. The film Joker, released on October of last year, didn't resemble its comic book counterpart, and yet was praised by fans and became the highest grossing R-rated movie of all time. Heck, James Gunn basically made Guardians of the Galaxy his own, and they are now an important part of the Marvel Universe. These are two examples of successful and accurate comic book films, but sometimes deviating too much from the source material may hurt the film. An example of this would be Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer, a film I watched once, and it featured the iconic villain Galactus. But instead of being the character he was a cloud in the movie. This was really odd, and a disrespectful interpretation of the character. Another example of a character in a superhero film that wasn't adapted very well is Jonathan Kent in Man of Steel. In the film, Clark saves a school bus from drowning. When his adoptive father, Jonathan, hears about this, he goes to Clark and tells him that he should have kept his identity a secret. Young Clark then asks,
"What was I supposed to do? Just let him die?"
Then Jonathan responds with,
Maybe.
"What in the world? Maybe?" The thing about Mon Pa Kent is that they're supposed to instill the morals and ideals to Clark, making him into the bright and humane being that is Superman. Having Jonathan Kent tell Clark that maybe you should have let the others die is preposterous. If Jonathan Kent didn't want Clark to be Superman, then what was his motivation to become the Man of Steel? It's really weird. I guess that's why Superman was also pretty dark and doesn't instill hope at all in those films. This scene in Spider-Man 2 feels more like Superman than Zack Snyder's interpretation of the character.
Hey, you guys. No playing in the streets.
Yes, Mr. Spider-Man.
See ya.
Actually, let's talk about Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy for a moment. I think it's a really good example of how much comic book accuracy is needed in an adaptation. The Spider-Man trilogy is definitely not a panel-to-panel copy of the comics, which is a good thing because adapting a medium to another will require changes. But it sticks to the core elements of what makes Spider-Man. Spidey is a hero who puts his personal life over others and never gives up in the face of unsurmountable odds. A topic which I dedicated a whole video to, and it's one of my favorite videos on the channel. Spider-Man is motivated by the death of his uncle and is as nerdy and awkward as can be. Sam Raimi's Spider-Man is a good representation of the character, because despite of the inaccuracies, his core is intact. Also, Tobey's Spider-Man having organic webbing, something that never really happened much in the comics, was actually a very good choice. Because Spidey depended on organic webbing, it gave the second film, where he lost his powers due to lack of interest, much more interesting, and gave the viewer something to really worry about. Will Spidey get his powers back? If so, how? Will he get it in time to stop Doc Ock and save Mary Jane? Peter, depending on his organic webbing, is way more of a pro than a con in Raimi's trilogy, and I think it shows how much accuracy is really needed in a comic book adaptation. The important thing when it comes to adapting comics into other media is to stick to the core of the source material, while changing other elements to better suit the medium and the story you're trying to tell. Civil War was by no means a panel-to-panel representation of the comic and was actually a very different take on the story, yet it made for a better film. I mean, the comic wasn't super great to begin with. The film adaptation of Watchmen, while having a lot of scenes directly pulled from the pages and panels of the graphic novel, pleased fans to a certain degree, but didn't really tell a cohesive, compelling, and memorable story to mainstream audiences. Making a good piece of entertainment based on a comic doesn't rely on how accurate it is or not. It's about telling a good story, while being respectful to the source material. If good changes are made, then it may even result in something truly special. The early Superman Fleischer cartoons in the 1940s actually introduced several aspects to the Superman mythos that we would regard today as the staple elements of what makes Superman. It renamed the Daily Star to the Daily Planet, and most importantly, in order to make the animation easier, established Superman as a character who could fly. Miles Morales in the comics was kind of a bland character who didn't really have a unique personality or a lot of interesting traits. It kind of bugged me so much in the middle of 2018 that I made an entire video on it. But at the end of that video, I said that if this problem is going to be fixed, it would be in the upcoming animated film, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, and it truly did. Miles in the animated film was 100 times better than his character in the comics. To make a good comic book adaptation, it's always good to change several aspects of the property you are adapting to better suit the story you're trying to tell. But you also need to respect the source material at the same time. Unless you're adapting a character like Matter Eater Lad, in which case, you can probably do whatever drastic changes you want to him. I don't think people will care that much. Anyway, that is all for today. Please leave a like if you enjoyed this video and subscribe and tap the notification bell to see more in the future. My name is Joshua C, and I will see you in the next comic book video.